He watched her choose another dance partner. That was the night the Alpha King finally chased her. Nadia ironed her red dress twice. Not because it needed it. The dress was fine after the first pass. She had checked, running her palm across the fabric with the slow attention of someone searching for a reason to keep going, and there was nothing there. No crease, no wrinkle, no justification. She ironed it anyway. Her hands needed something to do. If her hands were busy, they weren't shaking. If they weren't shaking, she could pretend she wasn't nervous. If she could pretend she wasn't nervous, she could walk into that gala tonight like a woman with her whole life under control. She did not have her life under control. She had a red dress and a plan. Two very different things. The plan was simple, almost insultingly simple. The kind of plan that makes complete sense at 11 p.m. when you are alone in your apartment and talking to your reflection, and your reflection, wisely, doesn't argue back. Walk in. Be professional. Be warm and competent and socially adept. Do the job she had been hired to do, which was to make this evening run without visible seams, and go home by midnight with her dignity intact and her feelings where she had put them, which was in a very small, very organized box labeled "Do Not Open at Work." She was absolutely, completely, without any shadow of doubt, not going to spend the evening tracking where Cyrus was in the room. She had held to that commitment for 11 days. 11 days of reasonable internal argument. 11 days of reminding herself that men with his kind of gravity did not, in the real world, rearrange other people's insides simply by existing in the same physical space, and that whatever she had been experiencing was manageable, categorizable, and entirely under control. 11 days of almost believing it. The problem was the elevator. The problem was last Thursday, when they had both gotten in at the lobby level, and she had pressed the 4th floor, and he had pressed the 7th, and neither of them had said a single word for 4 floors, and she had counted every second. 41 seconds, she had counted. That was the specific, concrete, undeniable evidence that she had a problem. She put the iron down, looked at the dress, hung it on the back of the bathroom door, and went to the kitchen and made tea and sat at the small window table and watched the street below. Her building was on a busy enough road that there was always something to observe. Auto rickshaws, families returning from somewhere, a chai cart that materialized between 9 and 11 like something from a different city. She watched. The street was entirely unhelpful. "You are a professional," she said to the window. "You have organized 300 people into a ballroom 16 times without incident. You have managed a flooded venue, a collapsed wedding cake, and one deeply unwise decision on someone's part to include a live peacock in a corporate event. You have done all of this in heels. You can attend a charity gala and be a normal human being." The window had no position on this. She drank her tea. Then she got ready. The dress was not for him. She was definitive about this. Her reflection maintained a careful neutrality. Nadia had grown up in Faisalabad, in a house that was loud in the essential way of houses with too many people in them. Cousins materializing without notice, aunties with opinions delivered at full strength, a mother who communicated through meals and meaningful pauses, and the precisely calibrated proverb deployed when she felt a daughter needed redirecting. Nadia was the middle of 3 girls, which meant she had learned the exact parameters of acceptable space-taking. Not so much that she caused notice, not so little that she vanished. Enough to be accounted for, not enough to be a problem. She had carried this skill into her adult life with the efficiency of someone who does not question why they are carrying something, only that it works. Into university, where she studied hospitality management and found, to her useful surprise, that she had a genuine aptitude for it. Not just the technical competence, which she developed through practice, but the underlying instinct for it, for reading the shape of a space and understanding what it needed, for anticipating the sequence of small problems that, if left unaddressed, would accumulate into a visible crisis. She was the kind of student who understood that being good at this work meant making it look effortless, and making it look effortless required more preparation than anyone watching would ever guess. Into her first job, at a mid-range hotel in Lahore, where she worked long hours and learned fast and once, in an incident she still sometimes described to new colleagues as a formative experience, organized the complete orderly evacuation of 400 people from a ballroom that was flooding from a burst pipe in under 12 minutes, in heels, without raising her voice once. She had been promoted twice in her first 3 years. Into the position she held now, events coordinator at the Crescent Grand, which was among the best hotels in the city, and where she was responsible for every gathering that passed through its doors, the weddings and corporate dinners and charity evenings and private celebrations, and the various events that defied easy categorization but required equal amounts of planning and graceful improvisation. She was good at her work because she understood what it actually was. People believed they were simply attending things. Nadia knew they were inside something she had built, every element of atmosphere and timing and physical arrangement working quietly together to produce a feeling, an experience, a memory or near memory. It was architecture, but not the permanent kind. Hers was built to last one evening and then be carefully dismantled. She understood performances. She was significantly less gifted, historically, at anything that required her to stop running one. Cyrus Malik ran 3 companies. He had taken over his father's logistics business at 26, restructured it, and then somehow also founded a real estate development firm and a hospitality investment group in the years that followed. He was 32. He moved through the world with the focused energy of a man who had decided at some point in his mid-20s that the standard human constraints of time and bandwidth were more or less optional for people who planned carefully enough. People in his professional world had started calling him the Alpha King at some point, behind his back. It was one of those nicknames that attaches to someone not by assignment but by accumulated accuracy. No one had chosen it. It had just emerged as the most efficient shorthand for a quality that was otherwise difficult to articulate. He was not aggressive or theatrical. He simply occupied whatever space he was in with a completeness that made the space feel arranged around him rather than the other way around. He had never asked for something he was not already certain of receiving. He had never negotiated from genuine uncertainty. He had been thinking about Nadia for 4 months, and he could not yet determine how it was going to resolve. That was a genuinely new experience. It had begun at the investors' quarterly dinner. He had arrived early, through the service corridor as he usually did, and had nearly walked into her. She was mid-sentence with the catering manager, her back half toward him, not performing for anyone, just working. The centerpieces were 6 inches too tall, and the sight lines across tables 4 and 6 would be blocked, and they needed to come down and be at the kitchen in 20 minutes. She had not looked up. She had finished her instruction and moved on to the next thing. He had stood there longer than necessary. He had been to a great many events and had observed many people managing them, and he had opinions about the ratio of visible authority to actual competence in the industry. What he had just seen was someone operating entirely in the second category. No performance of control, just a person who knew exactly what she was doing and was doing it. He had sent a note afterward, short. The centerpieces were perfect. Whatever you changed, it worked. He had sent it because it was true. Nadia had received it and read it twice and filed it in the professional correspondence section of her brain, where it obviously belonged, and had then thought about it approximately twice a week for 4 months. Not that she would have described it that way. The charity gala at the Crescent Grand happened every November. Nadia cared about this event more than most in the annual calendar, not because it was the largest, though it was among the largest, but because she had organized it 4 times now, and each year had found one thing to improve, and because the money it raised went to programs she understood specifically rather than abstractly. She had visited 2 of them. She knew what the work looked like on the ground. That mattered to her in a way she rarely discussed. She arrived at the hotel at 7. Setup was done by 7:15. She allowed herself the small luxury of standing still near the east corridor, holding a glass of sparkling water, doing her visual assessment. Lighting correct. Orchestra positioned correctly. The centerpieces this year were white and architectural, smaller than last year's by design, doing exactly what they were supposed to do. Of the 6 servers currently on the floor, 4 were moving with the easy rhythm she liked to see. 2 were still calibrating. They would find their footing within the next 20 minutes. The speaker near the east wall had a faint hum she would need to address before the speeches. She noted these things. She always noted these things. She thought about the catering invoice due Monday. She thought about the faint speaker hum. She thought about 41 seconds. Cyrus arrived at 7:40. She felt it before she registered it. The micro-adjustment of the room. Not visible, not audible, just present. The way atmospheric pressure changes before weather. She kept her eyes on the violinist. Thought about the speaker. Thought about the invoice. Did not look. 22. 23. She stopped counting. She was already counting. She picked up her glass and moved toward the far end of the room where there was a minor arrangement issue she suddenly needed to attend to. Julian Raza had known Nadia for 6 years. He was a graphic designer, good at his work with the quality of someone who cared about it genuinely, and they had become friends in the gradual and then permanent way that professional acquaintances sometimes do. His wife Aisha was home with their new baby, 8 weeks old, already conducting herself, according to Julian's voice notes, with an authority that was impressive in someone who had been in the world for less than 2 months. He had sent Nadia a note at noon. "Baby is sleeping. I escaped. I will be at the gala. Please protect me from anyone who wants to discuss golf at length. I am sincerely begging." She had laughed at that. Properly, the private kind. First time in a week. He found her at 8:15 near the arrangement she had not actually needed to attend to, appearing from the direction of the bar with 2 drinks and the expression of a man who had successfully navigated something he hadn't wanted to do. "The board member near the bar has opinions about the canapés," he reported. "The canapés are correct," she said. "He wants them smaller because he wants to eat 6 of them without the visual evidence." Julian considered this. "You know all of them. 4 years." He gave her one of the glasses. She took it. He stood beside her with the easy comfort of someone who knew her well enough to not require her to perform. "Dance with me," he said. "Aisha's orders. Exact words. Dance at least once, or it doesn't count." The orchestra had moved into something slow. The floor was half full. Nadia looked at the floor. And then, not by choice, just reflexively, the way you look at a thing before you have decided to, her eyes moved across the room. She looked back at Julian. "Okay," she said. She had not planned to enjoy it. The 3 minutes were supposed to be a reset, a brief functional departure from work mode. She had not planned for Julian to be actually capable at dancing, or for his quiet commentary on everything in the room, the board member's canapé pace, the violinist's expression of personal grievance with the music, the couple near the far wall who were clearly arguing about something that had nothing to do with the event, to make her relax into it against her intentions. He said something about the violinist and she laughed, really laughed, and she was mid-turn, still laughing, Julian's hand warm at her waist. When she made the mistake, she looked. Cyrus was 20 feet away, not moving, not talking, standing with a glass he had clearly forgotten to drink from, watching her. She caught his face in the fraction of a second before he registered that she was looking, before whatever he usually showed the world had time to reassemble. She had, over 4 months and several professional interactions, catalogued a number of his faces. The one that was making a decision, the one that was being sociable without being present, the one that was calculating something 2 moves ahead while appearing to be listening about something else entirely. She knew those. This was not any of those. This was the face of a man who was watching something move and feeling something about it that he did not have an existing category for. Raw in a way that his face was not usually raw. Something that lived beneath all the competence. She turned back to Julian, finished the turn, breathed. The song played through. She smiled at something he said and did not know what it was. The song ended. Julian bowed, properly, one hand to his chest, extravagant and warm, and she squeezed his arm and said goodbye to Aisha, and he drifted toward a colleague, and Nadia turned to go back to work, and found Cyrus 3 feet away. She had not heard him cross the room. He was simply there, occupying the space between where he had been and where she was, with the quiet, matter-of-fact arrival of someone for whom distance is administrative. "Nadia," he said. One word, her name, not loudly, not softly, direct, like it was the only honest thing he had produced all evening. "Cyrus," she said. He was looking at her the way people look at things they intend to understand, fully, without looking away first. "Dance with me." Not a question, a statement left in the space between them for her to engage with. She had prepared for this, or a version of it. She had the professional smile available, small talk at hand, an exit line she had practiced, because she was very good at exit lines. "I think I'm spoken for," she said. His eyes moved, briefly, to the space beside her where Julian had been standing. Where Julian was not standing, the corner of his mouth, almost a smile, the version that appeared when something had caught him genuinely. "Spoken for. Busy," she revised. "I'm working. You were working when you were dancing with Julian. That was a break." She kept her eyes level on his. "Break is over." He looked at her with the particular attention of someone who had been thinking about something for a long time and was now looking at the actual thing. "Come outside for a minute," he said. I know, working." A pause. 10 minutes. Not a dance, just a conversation. She had a no prepared. A perfectly good, respectful, clear no. 2 minutes, she said. She set her glass on the nearest tray, walked toward the terrace doors, did not look back. The cold came first, clean and sharp after 3 hours of the room's warmth, and she breathed it deliberately. The terrace faced east, overlooking a long fall of city, intersections, irregular building glow, the ordinary nighttime business of a city that was not interested in any particular private drama. She walked to the railing and put both hands on the cold metal. Cyrus came to stand beside her, not close, a considered distance, which communicated its own thing, that he was paying attention to the geometry of the situation, that he had no interest in crowding the decision. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I've been busy. You've been avoiding me." Not unkindly, accurately. She exhaled. The air was cold enough to show it briefly. "What do you want, Cyrus?" Honest question. "I don't have time for the other kind." Below them, a car horn. Further along the street, music. A dull beat, rapid and celebratory, belonging to a different building, a different party, people working out their own situations entirely separate from hers. "I've been trying to figure out how to have this conversation for 4 months, he said. "That's unusual for you." She kept her eyes on the city. "You're not someone who struggles with conversations." "I have conversations I know how to finish," he said. "This one, I didn't know the ending." She turned and looked at him then. She had to. It was too honest a thing to receive without looking at it. "And now?" she asked. He looked at her with the expression she had caught from the dance floor. Close range, in the November air, it was more visible. He looked like someone who had decided to put something down that they had been carrying for a long time. Not relieved, just present, the putting down visible on his face in a way his face was not usually used for. "Now I think I'd rather not know the ending," he said, "and start anyway." The orchestra continued through the glass. Someone in the ballroom laughed, loud enough to reach them. The city below went on with its night, indifferent and beautiful. She thought about the system, the careful architecture of managed distance and calibrated reveal she had built over years, not out of coldness but out of necessity, because she was someone who felt things loudly, at full volume, without built-in dampening, and she had learned at some cost that this required management. She thought about the specific cost of that learning. She thought about what it had taken to stop performing that learning, was the same as healing. She thought about 41 seconds. About a note. Whatever you changed, it worked. About a man on a cold terrace telling her he didn't know the ending and would like to start anyway, which was either the most honest thing she'd heard recently or the most reckless, and she could not fully distinguish between those two, and that inability was itself information. "There's a coffee place on Jail Road," she said. "I go on Sundays at 9. The chairs don't match. The chai takes 15 minutes. If you can figure out what to do with yourself for 15 minutes without anything to manage." She pulled the door open, walked back into the warmth. The ballroom received her. 300 people, light and music, and the particular organized beauty of an evening she had built. Julian appeared from somewhere near the bar. "You were on the terrace," he said. Getting air. With Cyrus Malik. He was also getting air. Julian looked at her with 6 years of friendship. Nadia, Julian. I am saying nothing. Good. I am exercising a level of restraint that I consider personally heroic. I'm aware. I appreciate it. He gave her a glass of something. She drank. Across the room, she did not plan this, it was simply where her eyes went. Cyrus was back in a group near the far windows, operational, his full presence restored. Nothing visible on his face that would indicate he had been on a terrace 2 minutes ago saying something true. Almost nothing. Across the full width of the room, his eyes found hers for the duration of exactly 1 breath, then back to his conversation. Nadia looked at her glass. She did not hear from him Friday. Saturday passed without contact. She had not given him her number, had not technically extended an invitation. She had described a place and a time in the context of an unfinished sentence, and then departed. She had left him the fraction of possible that a person with sufficient determination and resources would eventually find, and she had done this deliberately, because what she wanted to know was not whether he was interested. She already knew that. What she wanted to know was what kind of interested. Thursday afternoon, Rania appeared in her doorway. Rania was her assistant, 31, professionally precise, possessed of an emotional intelligence she deployed with the economy of someone who understood that attention was a limited resource and spent it carefully. She had an expression that Nadia recognized. There's a man in the lobby. Hotels have men in lobbies. A specific man, who asked for you by name and title. Reception came to me rather than calling through directly, and the reason reception gave was that they did not want to route Cyrus Malik to voicemail if that turned out to be a mistake. Nadia looked at her screen. Tell him I'm in a meeting. Rania was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. He is in the lobby, Nadia. I know. Tell him 15 minutes. Rania left without comment, which was its own form of comment. Nadia looked at the Zafar wedding brief, which needed 12 more minutes of work. She finished it in 11, with precise, focused attention, and spent the 12th minute sitting with her hands folded, looking at the wall, taking slow breaths. Then she went down. He was near the orchid installation, white, 3 feet tall, architectural, exactly as she had specified. He was looking at his phone with the patience of someone who had been told 15 minutes and found that perfectly acceptable. He looked up when she came through the lobby doors, and for a fraction of a second before he adjusted his expression, she caught something. Not quite relief, something adjacent to it. Something that came from having not known whether the 15 minutes meant she was coming or not. You were in a meeting, he said. I was finishing something, she said. I can come back. You're here. She gestured at 2 chairs in the lobby corner, away from the main traffic. Sit. He sat. She sat across from him. The lobby moved around them, ordinary, indifferent, doing what lobbies do. Sunday, he said. What about it? 9 o'clock. Jail Road. She held his gaze. He had found the place. Had found it from the name of a road and a time, which had required work. Asking someone. Looking. Using the partial information she had given him and doing something with it. He was here in person, which told her what it told her. The chai takes 15 minutes, she said. I have time. A pause. Don't be late, she said. He was not late. She arrived at 8:55 and he was already at the corner table. Not the biggest, not the best lit. The one in the back with the mismatched chairs and the small window onto the alley. A table for people not interested in being observed. He was holding a glass of water, looking at it, and his expression was the kind that appears on people who do not know they are being watched. Private, quiet. He looked, for a moment, like someone who had taken off something he usually wore. She walked in. He stood. You found it, she said. Some looking required. As intended, he agreed. They sat. She ordered the chai she always ordered. He ordered the same. You look like someone who wants coffee, she said. I thought I'd see what works here. The waiter was new. She could tell from the focused care with which he wrote things down. She watched him go back to the kitchen. You're watching the staff, Cyrus said. Habit. Professional. Everything I do is professional habit. He smiled. The real one. She had seen it 3 times before tonight, and each time it had done something she was still cataloging. That doesn't sound like a complaint. It isn't, she said. I like my job. I know. I've seen you do it. The chai took 14 minutes and 36 seconds. She timed it on her phone, in her lap, without making a production of it. While they waited, she talked about the Zafar wedding, the bride's mother, who had 17 requirements for napkin folds, each contradicting at least 2 of the others. About the service cart that had been broken since July and kept reappearing on maintenance reports without ever actually getting fixed, which she found philosophically interesting in a way she could not fully articulate. About the catering manager she worked with, who communicated in proverbs under stress, not modern proverbs, ancient ones, so archaic that Nadia had looked up several and found they predated the Ottoman Empire. Cyrus talked about his father briefly, in the way of someone for whom the subject has depth that the occasion doesn't yet call for. About a building in the old city that had started as a straightforward commercial renovation and had turned into something else when the contractors found original foundations that predated the current structure by several centuries, intact, unexpectedly load-bearing, requiring the entire design to be reconsidered. He had done that. He was still doing it. The timeline had extended by 18 months, and the budget had doubled, and he did not seem to consider this a problem so much as a development. "Why are you still doing it?" she asked. "Because it changed from something I had planned to something worth doing," he said. "Those are different." She looked at her cup, picked it up, put it down. Her hands did this. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Someone who was easier to put away." He did not flinch at that, considered it. "What category did I go in?" "The one that acquires things and eventually sets them somewhere." "Have I been impatient?" he said. "You came to my lobby instead of sending a message." "Messages are flat," he said. "I wanted to be present for this, not in a notification." She held that. Below the window, in the alley, 2 men were moving boxes with the efficiency of a task repeated many times. A cat appeared on a wall, surveyed them briefly, departed. "I have a system," she said. "I know. You've known me for 4 months. I've been paying attention for 4 months," he said. "That's different." A pause. "The system exists because you think ahead. You plan for the controllable variables, so you have capacity for the ones you can't predict. It's how you're built. It's also," he said, "why I'm a variable you haven't fully resolved yet." She looked at him. "That's a very specific reading. I've had 4 months to develop it." She was quiet. Something in her that had been maintaining a certain posture for a long time shifted, almost without permission, into something more upright. The kind of shift that happens when you have been braced, and the thing you were braced for turns out not to require bracing. "There's going to be a second Sunday," she said. "If you'll have it." "Yes," she said. On the second Sunday he brought her a book. She had mentioned an author in passing, 6 weeks before, in the middle of a conversation about something else, for no more than a minute. A translated edition she had not been able to find in Lahore. He had found it. He set it on the table when she sat down, without ceremony, without making it into something that required a proportional response. She held it for a moment. "You wrote down the name?" "Yes." "At the gala?" "Yes." "And then you found someone to help you find the shop?" "My assistant knows books." She turned it over, looked at the spine, set it beside her glass. "Thank you." Of course, she thought, without saying, about all the people who had not remembered smaller things. She added it to the ledger she was quietly keeping. He was funny. She had not anticipated this. Not the performed kind, not the humor that requires an audience. The dry, observational kind that lived in the details and required you to be paying close enough attention to catch it. He noticed things. He noted them plainly, without editorial, and then let them sit. He was also genuinely listening. She had come, over years, to understand the difference between someone listening and someone waiting for their turn to talk, and the distinction was something she felt at a low level throughout any conversation, the way you feel temperature. With Cyrus, she did not feel it. What she said informed what he said next, and the thing after that, and the conversation had the texture of something being built rather than traded. She had been waiting for that, she realized, without knowing she was waiting for it. On the third Sunday she arrived first. She was at the corner table when he came in at 9:01, and she said, "You're late." And he said, "By 1 minute." And she said, "I know." And he said, "You counted." And she said, "I count things." And he said without missing a beat, "I know, I've noticed." And she understood, in that small, ordinary exchange, that she was no longer managing this. That she had stopped managing it somewhere, probably on the terrace, probably earlier, possibly from 41 seconds in an elevator, that she had spent 4 months telling herself she was not thinking about. She was not ready to say any of this. There was time. The Sundays continued. The chairs never matched. The chai always took too long. The city outside the window went on being the city. Ordinary, ongoing, not particularly aware of what was happening at the corner table. On the fourth Sunday she asked him about his mother. He was quiet for longer than usual, and then said she had died when he was 19, and that he was still, at 32, occasionally surprised to reach for the phone to call her and find himself reaching toward an absence. He said this simply. He did not explain it, or apologize for it, or perform any particular relationship with it. He just set it down on the table between them, and she received it. She told him about her father, who was still alive and retired, and called her every Sunday evening to report on what the neighbors were doing, as if she had any relationship with the neighbors at all. She told him that she had for a long time resented being called to account for choices she had made that he had not expected her to make, and that somewhere in the last 2 years they had arrived at something like a détente that required no apology from either of them, which she thought was probably better than an apology would have been. He said, "That takes longer than most things." She said, "Yes." She was not performing when she said it. That was the thing she had not prepared for, how much of herself she was setting down without quite deciding to. Not carelessly. Not because she had abandoned the careful approach, but because he was making it possible, in the specific way of people who receive things without making you regret having offered them. She had told herself when this started that the system mattered, that the system was protection, and she had built it for reasons, and those reasons did not disappear because someone interesting had turned up. The system was still there. She was just finding, Sunday by Sunday, that it was a smaller room than she had thought, and that she kept choosing to step outside of it. By the 6th Sunday she knew that she was in something, that it had started on the terrace and probably before the terrace, and that the question was not whether she was in it, but what she was going to do now that she understood that she was. He walked in at exactly 9, which was the first time he had been exactly on time, always a little early, never late, and today precisely 9. And she looked up, and he sat down and said, "You're not going to say I'm late." And she said, "You're exactly on time." And he said, "I practiced." And she looked at him for a moment and laughed. The private version. He looked at her laughing with the expression of someone who has just received something they were not expecting and is not going to say so. The chai was ready in 11 minutes that day. She did not mention this. Some things are best left uncounted. The gala happened every November. Nadia had organized it 4 times. In all 4 times, she had never stepped onto the terrace for personal reasons. She had always had somewhere to be, something to check, some element of the evening that required her attention. The 5th November she set her glass down on the tray and walked through the door. He followed. That was the whole of it, when she thought about it. That was what the chase actually looked like, in real life, without the architecture of drama. A woman on a dance floor who chose something that was not him. A man who watched her laugh and felt something move in him that he did not have an existing name for, and crossed the room and went out into the cold and said something honest. Not a man pursuing something that was running. A man who, for the first time in 32 years of getting what he wanted, had found something that required him to wait. And who had waited. And who had shown up on Sundays. And who had found a translated book by an author mentioned once in passing, and had brought it without making it into a moment, and had set it on the table like it was the obvious thing to do. That was the chase. That was what it looked like when it was real. And Nadia, who had built her system over years of necessary learning, who had organized 300 people into a ballroom without visible seam, who had learned at some cost the difference between availability and feeling and had taken a long time to stop performing the first while maintaining the second. She had set her glass down. She had walked ahead. She had not looked back, because she already knew he would follow, not because she was certain of him. She was careful enough and had learned enough to know that certainty came from time and not from instinct, and that instinct was a beginning and not a conclusion. But because she had offered him the fraction of possible that she always left, and he had done something with it. And because the kinds of things he had done, showing up in person instead of a message, finding the coffee place from a road and a time, writing down the name of an author, sitting at the corner table and waiting, were the kinds of things that answered questions she had been asking without quite articulating. She was asking, what kind of interested? He was answering, the kind that does the work. The Sundays continued, and one afternoon in December, walking back from lunch, her phone buzzed, and it was a message from a number she had now saved, and it said only, "There's a bookshop I found that has a second author you mentioned. Thought you should know." She stood on the pavement and read it, replied, "You're keeping a list." He replied, "I've been keeping a list." She stood on the pavement in December with her phone in both hands and understood, fully and without reservation, that she was in something that was not going to resolve itself in a small, manageable, compartmentalized way. That was fine. That was in fact the point. She replied, "Sunday." He replied, "Sunday." The city moved around her. Auto rickshaws, vendors, families going somewhere in the particular weekday bustle of a December afternoon. Nobody was watching. Nobody particularly cared what was happening on this specific pavement at this specific moment. She walked back to work. She was smiling. The private version. She had told herself the morning of the 7th Sunday that she was going to be measured. She had gotten very good, over the years, at measuring herself, at maintaining the exact amount of available space that was appropriate without tipping into something less controllable. She was going to have her chai. She was going to talk about reasonable things. She was going to leave at a reasonable hour and feel reasonably good about how she had conducted herself. She arrived at the coffee place on Jail Road at 8:51 and found him already there. He was reading something on his phone. He looked up when she came in. He had already ordered her chai, which she had not asked him to do, and which meant he had been there long enough to order it and then simply wait. The chai was already on the table, exactly the right color in the cup she always used because she always sat at this table, and the small fact of it, that he had noticed, that he had done this, did something to the interior of her chest that she was not prepared to describe. "You ordered for me," she said. "I assumed," he said. "Was I wrong?" She looked at the cup, then at him. No. She sat down, wrapped both hands around the cup. It was cold outside, December now, and the mornings had gotten sharper, and the warmth of the cup was immediately necessary. "How was the Zafar wedding?" he asked. He had remembered that it was this weekend. She had mentioned it in passing a month ago, in the middle of a longer conversation, and he had remembered. The napkin folds were perfect, she said, all 17 specifications. "You reconciled the contradictions." "I did not reconcile them," she said. "I created a napkin fold that appeared to satisfy all of them simultaneously, while actually satisfying 4, in a way that the mother would not be able to identify precisely as a compromise, but would feel vaguely appeased by." He looked at her for a moment. "That's impressive." "That's 4 years," she said. He smiled. She noted it. She was noting everything. She had accepted this about herself. She was someone who noticed things and would continue to notice them, and the most productive use of her energy was to stop trying to not notice and simply notice with appropriate discretion about what she did with the noticing. "Tell me about the 4th Sunday," he said. She looked at him. "We're on the 7th Sunday. I know. Tell me about the 4th one, from your perspective." This was a new kind of thing to say. She considered it. "Why?" "Because I had a version of it," he said. "I'm curious what yours was." She picked up her cup, set it down, picked it up again. "You talked about the building in the old city, the one with the original foundations." "Yes." "You said you were extending the timeline and doubling the budget, and you seemed," she paused, finding the word, satisfied with that. Not resigned, satisfied. I am, he said. What was your version? My version was that I realized I'd been expecting you to say something about return on investment, she said, and you didn't. You said it was worth doing, and I didn't know what to do with that. Why? She held the cup. Outside the window, onto the alley, a pigeon was conducting a thorough investigation of something near the drain. Because I don't hear that very often, she said. In my work, everything is return on investment. The money raised, the number of guests, the metrics of a successful evening. And I accept that because that's how work functions. But I don't, she stopped. Don't what? He said. I don't often meet people who talk about worth without the metric, she said, outside of the thing I do with the gala. And even there I keep it mostly to myself. He was quiet, listening in the way he listened. The fourth Sunday, she said, was the first one where I came home and didn't spend any time at all thinking about whether I should be doing this. He looked at her. And before that? Before that I was spending time on it, she said. How much time? Enough, she said. The pigeon outside had finished its investigation and departed. I was doing the same thing, he said. She looked at him. Not about whether I should be doing it, he said. I already knew I wanted to. The thing I was spending time on was, I kept asking myself what I was bringing to this, whether what I had to offer was actually what you needed, whether the version of this I was imagining was the right version or just the one that was comfortable for me. She was quiet for a moment. That's a more specific worry than I expected. I've had time to develop it. What did you conclude? He picked up his coffee. He had switched to coffee 2 Sundays ago, which she had not commented on but had noted, and held it. That I didn't know, and that the not knowing was information. That if I was asking those questions, I was probably not the man I had been 4 months ago, which was the man who didn't ask those questions. And that the change was directional. She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that it would have been uncomfortable with someone else. Directional, she said. Towards something, he said. Not away from it. She looked at her cup, looked at the table, looked at him. I'm not easy, she said. I know. I mean specifically. I have systems. I have ways I do things. I have opinions about napkin folds and centerpiece heights and the correct placement of speakers to avoid acoustic problems. And all of this is professional, but it's also, she paused, it's also just how I am. I have a lot of opinions about how things should be done. I know, he said. And I'm telling you this not as a warning, she said. I'm telling you because it matters to me that you know that you understand what the actual terrain looks like. I understand, he said. You sound very certain of that. I've been paying attention for 4 months, he said. I'm not in this because I think you're easy. I'm in this because you're the most competent person I've ever watched work, and you're also someone who counts the seconds in an elevator, and the fact that you do both of those things simultaneously is interesting to me at a level I don't fully have words for yet. She was quiet. He was quiet. The street outside the window had its Sunday sounds. You know about the elevator, she said. I counted 2, he said. She looked at him. 41 seconds. 41 seconds, he said. And she thought, well, that was that, then. The December Sundays were colder, and the chai was more necessary, and they stayed longer than the original intention of 9 o'clock implied. The coffee shop filled up as the morning progressed, and then emptied again around 11 as people went back to their Sundays, and she and Cyrus stayed at the corner table with the mismatched chairs, and talked about things that mattered and things that didn't, and the distinction between those two categories became harder to identify as the weeks went on. She learned that he woke very early, 4:30, sometimes earlier, not from anxiety but from a genuine preference for the quiet of the pre-dawn city, that she found both impressive and slightly strange. He learned that she was a person who read in the bathtub, which she did not normally disclose to anyone, and he responded to this with the specific seriousness of someone receiving important data. She learned that he had a complicated relationship with his father's legacy, the gratitude for the foundation and the weight of what it implied, and the ongoing negotiation between those two things that he conducted mostly internally, and sometimes, now, with her. He learned that she called her mother every Friday evening without fail, even when she was tired, even when the calls were not particularly nourishing, because she understood that the reliability of the call was itself the thing being offered. He learned about the flooding ballroom and the 12 minutes and the heels. "You could have taken them off," he said. "The guests would have seen me," she said. "They were being evacuated from a flood." "They were still guests," she said. He looked at her with the particular expression that meant he was going to think about what she had just said for a while after this conversation ended. She was learning to recognize it. She was learning a lot of things. She learned that he was someone who fixed things, not in the way that could become controlling, in the way that had become habitual because he was built for problems, genuinely liked problems, and experienced the existence of a solvable problem as a kind of invitation he found it difficult to decline. She learned that this quality was something he was aware of, and was, in his measured way, trying to calibrate, that he had, at some point before she knew him, understood that not everything wanted to be fixed, and that the instinct to fix could read as the refusal to simply be present with difficulty. He told her this directly, in a way that most people would not have, and she received it directly, in a way that confirmed for both of them that whatever they were doing was not performance. She learned that his hands were very still when he was listening. She had noticed this early. The stillness was not absence. He was fully present in those moments, more present than most people were with any part of themselves. The stillness was attention. She found that she trusted the stillness. She learned that he had wanted to call her, multiple times, in the weeks after the gala and before the first Sunday, and had not. Not because he was playing a game, because he had understood, at some level he could not fully explain, that the structure she had offered, the specific, partial, effortful structure, required him to arrive with the right energy, that showing up as himself rather than as the man who had everything organized was what the coffee shop on Jail Road was asking for. He had understood this without her having to say it. She did not tell him that this understanding was the thing that had made the yes possible. She told him other things instead. They talked about the building in the old city, which was progressing, and about what he imagined it becoming, and about the particular difficulty of doing something that did not yet have a form you can point to and saying, "This is worth it." She told him about a program the Charity Gala funded that worked with young women in skills training, and about a visit she had made to one of the facilities 2 years ago, and about a 15-year-old she had met who had wanted to work in hospitality and who she had given her card to, and who had emailed 3 months later asking if there were any available training positions, and who Nadia had spent 4 hours over 2 weeks figuring out how to make happen. "Did it work?" he asked. "She's a junior events assistant at the Marriott," she said. "I heard from her last month." He looked at her the way he looked at her when she said things that he was going to be keeping. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "I'm just learning the terrain." She looked at him. "You said it mattered to you, that I understood the actual terrain," he said. "I'm trying to." She was quiet for a moment. "It's a more interesting terrain than I expected," he said. "That's all." She looked at her cup. She was about to say something that she had been very carefully not saying for 11 Sundays, which was that the same was true from her side, that the terrain she was learning was more interesting than she had given herself permission to expect, and that this was something she intended to keep and not set aside, and that she was not in this because she had run out of alternatives, or because the system had finally broken down, but because she had, at some point that she could not precisely locate, made a choice. She was about to say this. Her phone rang. Work emergency. The service lift at the hotel had stopped between floors, with a wedding party inside. She was out of her chair before the second ring. "I have to go," she said. "Go," he said. She was at the door. "Sunday," he said, from the table. "Sunday," she said, already moving. She resolved the lift situation in 40 minutes. The wedding party was retrieved. The groom's mother needed a glass of water and a chair. The florist had to be redirected because the delay meant the bouquets were arriving at the wrong moment, and none of this was visible to the guests when they finally assembled in the ballroom. She called him from the service corridor afterward. She had not planned to. She dialed the number without making a conscious decision to dial it, and he answered on the second ring, and she said, "Everyone is fine. The lift is fixed. I just wanted to tell you." A pause. "Thank you," he said, and she could hear from the quality of the pause before it what the thank you contained. She went back to work. She thought about what he had said, learning the terrain. She thought about the fact that she had called to tell him everyone was fine. She thought about the fact that there was a him to call. The January Sundays were different from the November and December ones, not because anything had changed, but because enough had accumulated that the Sundays themselves had become something she moved toward, rather than toward with caution. The distinction was small and significant in the way that most meaningful distinctions are. On the first Sunday in January she arrived at 8:47, 8 minutes early, which was not accidental, and he was already there, which was also not accidental. And when she sat down, he slid a cup of chai across the table and said, 12 minutes today. I timed it. And she said, I know you timed it. And he said, I know you know. And she laughed. The private version. He looked at her laughing. I'd like to see you outside of Sundays, he said. She held the laugh for a moment, after it would have otherwise ended. That's a change. It's the next thing, he said. Tuesday or Wednesday is better for me, she said. Not this week. Next week. Next week, he said. Tuesday, she said. I'll find somewhere with better chairs, he said. The chairs here are fine, she said. The chairs here are terrible, he said. The chairs here are exactly right, she said, and picked up her cup. He looked at her across the corner table with its mismatched chairs and its small window onto the alley and the city outside going on with its January morning, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything that would have been useful to say because the moment did not require it. The red dress was still hanging on the back of the bathroom door. She had washed it and rehung it. She saw it every morning. Some days she thought about the gala, about the dance floor, and the look on his face, and the cold November terrace, and one half-finished sentence, and what it had opened into. Some days she thought about 41 seconds. About a note that said, whatever you changed, it worked. About a man who had ordered her chai and found her book and remembered the Zafar wedding and counted the seconds in the elevator and had, on a cold terrace in November, put down something he had been carrying and said, I'd rather not know the ending. The Alpha King had chased her, not across a room, not dramatically, not with urgency or declarations, with Sundays, with patience she had not known was in him, with the particular quality of attention that meant he was not performing interest but genuinely having it, with the willingness, for the first time in 32 years of acquiring things and managing them and moving on to the next, to wait and to not manage and to be simply present with something that was not his yet and might not be, and to be in that uncertainty without trying to resolve it. She had not made it easy. She would not have trusted easy. She had made it the precise amount of difficult that revealed the truth of a thing, and the truth of this was, he had done the work. She was still learning the full shape of him. She thought she would be for a long time, and she found that she wanted to be. That was new. She walked to work on Tuesday of the following week by a route that took her past the coffee shop on Jail Road, which was not necessary and which she did for no reason she would have articulated. It was a Tuesday morning in January, and the street was doing what streets do in January. Quick, coded, purposeful, and the chai cart she had watched from her window was out earlier than usual, serving people who had somewhere to be. She had somewhere to be. She was looking forward to it. That was the ending and the beginning, the same thing, the way endings and beginnings tend to be when you look at them honestly. She had stood at a terrace railing with her hands on cold metal and looked at a city that did not know her, and she had made a decision that felt like an unfinished sentence, and she had walked back through the glass door and not looked back. He had followed, and the following had become Sundays, and the Sundays had become something she did not have a full name for yet. That was fine. The name would come. There was time. She thought about that walk to work sometimes, when she was organizing events, when she was ironing something she did not need to iron, when she was counting seconds in elevators that no longer contained the particular complication of him, because they usually contained him, and that was a different thing entirely. She thought about the system. The system was still there. She was not someone who dismantled things she had built with good reason. She still thought ahead. She still planned for the controllable variables. She still moved through rooms with the specific awareness of someone who knew how rooms worked and what they needed. She was just no longer using the system to manage herself away from something real. That was the distinction. That was the one she had found, on the other side of a November terrace, and 11 Sundays, and a phone call from a service corridor, and a Tuesday evening in January, that she walked toward without any of the weight she had carried for 4 months. She was not running a performance anymore. Or she was always running one, in some sense. In her work, in the world. But she was not running one for him. And the not running was the most honest thing she had done in a long time, and she found that she was not afraid of what honesty cost. She had been afraid of it before. She was not now. That changed things. It changed the shape of a room when he was in it. Not in the dramatic way, not the way he changed rooms, which was gravity and presence and the adjustment of everyone around him. In the quieter way. The way a room felt different when you were not working to maintain a distance from the thing you actually wanted. The way space opened up when you stopped filling it with management. She had spent 4 months filling it with management. The 5th month, she stopped. The Sundays kept going, past the turn of the year, into the longer light of February, into the particular restlessness of a city loosening into spring. They tried 2 other coffee places. He had found them both. Both had better chairs. Both were objectively superior in every measurable way, and she still preferred the one on Jail Road. Why? He asked, on a Sunday in February. Because it's the first one, she said. He looked at her across their usual corner table. Is that a sufficient reason? It is for me, she said. He did not argue with this. He had learned, by February, which things were worth arguing about and which things were hers to simply be right about. She had always been like this. She was not going to change it. He was not trying to change it. Good, he said. Then we'll stay here. She picked up her cup. Outside the window, the alley had a pigeon investigating it, which was not unusual. The city had its February sounds. Somewhere down the street, the secondary school was letting out for the day. Voices, the particular noise of collective youth, the sound of people who do not yet know they are going to become the people they are going to become. She had become who she was, largely, in rooms like this one. Not this specific room. Rooms like it. Ordinary rooms where things that mattered happened without announcement, without ceremony, in the quiet dailiness of a life that was hers. She was still in the middle of becoming. That was fine. You were always in the middle of becoming. The trick was not to miss it by waiting for it to be finished. She looked at him. He was reading something on his phone, and he did not know she was looking, and his face had the same expression it had on the first Sunday when she had walked in and found him already there. Private. Present. Whatever version of him existed when he was not operating. She liked that version. She was glad she had set her glass down.